Alright, so who's in the mood for a Western? The Harder They Fall is the new Netflix film starring my man crush Idris Elba, along with Jonathan Majors, Regina King, LaKeith Stanfield, and a whole bunch more stars. So grab your hat and guns, giddy up! When outlaw Nat Love discovers that his enemy, Rufus Buck, is being released from prison, he rounds up his gang to track Rufus down and seek revenge. So this is a revenge tale, as so many of Westerns are, where we have outlaw Nat Love, who's played by Jonathan Majors, out to get his sworn enemy, Rufus Buck, who is played by Idris Elba. Now, both of these guys are bad guys, but for the purpose of this tale, Love is the anti-hero. He's the one that we're supposed to root for. There are a couple of things that caught me off guard at first, and one is the music within this. There's also the presentation and the pacing, which it is like a traditional Western, but there is a newness that is brought into this that brings just some modern-ish flair. The music may not be what you'd expect. Now, there's a lot of hip-hop with even some gospel thrown in, along with some ballads that would feel at home in any Western. While the music was jarring at first, I began to enjoy how it augmented and complemented the story that was being told. And this isn't the first time that we've had a period-type movie with more modern music playing throughout. One that popped into my head while I was watching this was A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger. And on that one, the characters interacted with the music, so it was even more of a presence within the story. In this, the music is just the soundtrack to enhance what we watch. And like I said, once I got over the initial shock of the more modern music within this, I was fully on board and I loved it. Like any great Western, this is patient in the storytelling. It meanders through the story with a deliberate but slower pace. And there were a couple of moments, though, that I did feel the time more, and that just means that it was a little uneven in its pacing structure. Now, the story itself is a very straightforward and simple one, with the crux of the story following Love seeking out revenge on Buck. And each of the outlaws has their respective gangs, all with deadly skills. And whoo-hoo, that cast that makes up the gangs, they're spectacular. We've got the talents of Regina King, LaKeith Stanfield, Zazie Beetz, Edi Gathegi, RJ Cyler, Danielle Deadwyler, and someone who's not necessarily in a gang, but rounding out the cast is the wonderful Delroy Lindo. And there are so many great performances here, and sometimes we get to watch very powerful monologues that are filled with emotion and also incredible story depth. The interactions between Regina King and Zazie Beetz were so compelling and riveting, especially one where King is recounting a story while she's peeling an apple. The delivery during this and even the camera work absolutely sucked me in, and I'm not sure I was actually breathing much because I was so entranced. LaKeith Stanfield was also one that absolutely grabbed hold of me with his character. He delivers his lines in a calm and patient manner, which are in stark contrast to the speed of his draw. Now, I was surprised that even though Idris Elba is one of the top billed, he's actually in this a ton less than I thought he'd be. That doesn't mean that he doesn't command the screen when he's featured, though. As Rufus Buck, he's a menacing force to be reckoned with, no matter who he's interacting with. He exudes power, but it's that ruthless kind. And I loved the character and how Elba brought him to life, quietly scary with just his piercing eyes. Jonathan Majors, on the other hand, is in so much of this, and I loved what he brought to the story. As Nat Love, he's very aware of who he is and what he is. Knowing he's an outlaw allows for some subtle humor and also some really good character moments. And like Elba, there's a fierceness that Majors brings to his character, but I love how it's offset by a goodness that is contained within. And I wouldn't call it an internal struggle between good and evil. I mean, the character is clearly a bad guy, but he's got a righteous cause and a ton of charisma, making him the one that we want to root for. There's also a great scene between the two leads that is emotional and raw, and they have a great dynamic, and I wanted to have more scenes with them together. Now, I think you might be able to see what's coming between the two before it's revealed, but I don't think it's going to ruin anything if you do see it coming. I enjoyed the camera work within this. First, the cinematography of the landscapes is just stunning. They capture the grandeur of the plains and then showing how dauntingly large they are in comparison to the characters as they ride along just in the background. The towns that are also created are wonderful to look at. Now, there are a couple that our characters visit that have buildings that look like you'd expect in a Western, but instead of those drab colors, the buildings are painted with just vibrant shades, making them come alive on the streets. And also in one short sequence, another town is shown, and I laughed out loud at how spot on the on-screen description was for the visuals that we see. There are also times in this where the camera reacts to the beats of the music, or to gunshots, and the lens will push in on a character on beat, creating sort of a pulsing effect without pulling back after pushing in. And it wasn't done often, and it wasn't distracting, but it was just something creative used here and there to accentuate a scene. There's one moment in this also where the camera focuses in on Majors' face, where he ends his dialogue by looking directly into the screen. Now, it felt a little like Delroy Lindo's incredibly powerful monologue in Da 5 Bloods. Now, while I don't think that this monologue is on that level, just to have the character finish their lines by looking directly at us is an effective, if not unsettling move in the storytelling. Now, even though this has a slower pace, as I mentioned earlier, the story still packs in a lot of brutal violence. We get some killer gunfights, and the camera doesn't shy away from showing the blood and all the bullet wounds. And then when the movie gets to the final act, there's about a 40-minute showdown that is intense, and sometimes stressful, and wickedly violent. I mean, it is an awesome way to conclude the story. And there were even some moments that were heartbreaking, showing me how invested I'd become in it all. So overall, The Harder They Fall is an entertaining revenge tale with characters that are engaging and charismatic. The use of modern music added a good dynamic to the storytelling, despite it catching me off guard at first. Now, the story is simple, but the performances are what drew me in, engaging me with their wit, humor, and emotion. I loved the cinematography because of how the landscapes and characters are captured, and when the violence erupts, it's bloody and graphic. While this 2-hour and 10-minute runtime did drag in spots, the overall pace of the story is in line with other westerns, so the slowness is semi-expected. There's no sex, maybe some brief nudity, it was really hard to tell in one sequence, a lot of profanity, and a bunch of bloody violence. I give The Harder They Fall 4 out of 5 couches. So do you enjoy westerns? Do you have a favorite? Let me know what it is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.